Magic items in D&D 5th edition are powerful pieces of gear and equipment that are designed to give your players an edge in a variety of situations, mostly combat. However, among those items are those meant to punish players who are either too greedy or don't bother to take the necessary precautions and practice safe attunement by adding a curse into the mix. That being said, not every curse was necessarily bad, and in fact could even be used in favor of the wearer. And exposing itself as his first pick of this list at number 10 is the Armor of Vulnerability set from the Dungeons Master's Guide. These rare set of plate armors come in 3 varieties that grant protection against one type of physical damage, while granting vulnerability to the other 2 as its curse. For example, the slashing variant of Armor of Vulnerability grants the wearer resistance to slashing damage, while gaining vulnerability to bludgeoning and piercing damage. While taking double damage from 2 sources of physical damage is a harsh downside, having all inherent resistances to at least one of the 3 main types of physical damage is still a great boon to have, especially against certain encounters where one or both damage types you're vulnerable to might not even exist. That being said, taking double damage from 2 common damage types definitely hurts this armor's viability, especially if you're playing someone who likes to be in the front lines alone, such as a fighter or paladin, and will most likely be taking the brunt of melee damage, which can usually come in a variety of 3 damage types. Short swords deal piercing damage, warhammers deal bludgeoning damage, and long swords deal slashing damage. So if you're fighting a group of bandits that will most likely have a wide array of weapons, then this armor might actually work against you rather than help you. Unfortunately, like most cursed items, the curse simply doesn't end by removing the armor. Instead, you have to be targeted by a remove curse spell or something similar to remove the curse. Remove Curse is a 3rd level abjuration spell that can be used by clerics, paladins, warlocks, and wizards, and a couple of other subclasses. It has a cast time of 1 action and a range of touch, and removes all curse affecting 1 creature or object, ending them instantly. And if the object happens to be a curse magic item, then the spell also breaks the owner's attunement to the object so it can be removed or discarded afterwards. Luckily, the curse only applies once you attune to the armor. So if you remove the curse on the wearer, you lose the vulnerability set by the curse while still maintaining your resistance to slashing damage. This is because, rules as written, you have to target the creature, not the object, in order to end the curse. And since the remove curse spell only breaks the attunement to the item if the object itself is targeted, there's no conflict. While this might seem unintended, if we take a look at something like Berserker's Axe, you'll notice that while wielding it, you are unwilling to part with the axe, with no stipulation on how to remove the curse using the remove curse spell. Essentially, in this case, you would have to use remove curse on the Berserker's Axe itself in order to actually unattune to it, thus losing out on any of the benefits of the axe until you attune to it again, and thus be subjected to the curse once more. That being said, however, having 2 huge downsides right from the get-go is the biggest reason why the Armor of Vulnerability only takes number 10 on this list, as there are so many better curse items you can accidentally stumble upon. And rocking the number 9 spot on this list, we have the Cursed Luckstone from Ghost of Saltmarsh. This is an uncommon stone that grants you a 1-time per dawn benefit of gaining advantage on 1 ability check of your choice while attuned to it. However, being a cursed item, it comes with the downside of making your next 2 ability checks afterwards be made with disadvantage. While being able to grant yourself advantage on an ability check you want in the game is a very good effect to have, the downside of forcing your next 2 ability checks to be made with disadvantage is definitely on the more annoying side when it comes to curses. This means you can't really stand idly by while your party members make ability checks for you after using the stone's magic. Eventually, you'll have to make an initiative roll or a stealth check, which will force you to have a less favorable outcome for those rolls. Instead, the best way to deal with this is by going for a seemingly harmless ability check, like flirting with a stranger at a bar that you're not so concerned about messing things up with, or lifting a boulder you already know is too heavy for you to lift unless you roll incredibly well. That being said, just like with the Armor of Vulnerability, the curse can be removed by a remove curse spell, which will allow you to keep the benefit of rolling an ability with advantage while removing the downside of making your next 2 ability checks with disadvantage. But even then, you're still only gaining advantage on a single ability check once per dawn, which, while still a good effect, doesn't really amount to much unless you save it for something you're extremely good at, and want to help ensure that you succeed at that check, such as a really high stealth or persuasion check. All in all, while it does have a great effect, it's not as high powered as other curse items that we'll see later, so it only takes the number 9 spot on this list. And chipping away the number 8 spot on this list is the Shard of Xeluan from Keys of the Golden Vault. This rare 1 foot long shard grants you a couple of powerful benefits while attuned to it. You're able to use the shard as a spellcasting focus while holding it, and gain a +1 bonus to your spell attack rolls. You also gain the benefit of having your strength score increased by a whopping 4 to a maximum of 22, which is the biggest increase to a single ability score an item can give in the game that isn't something that automatically sets your ability scores, such as the Belts of Giant Strength, for example. However, that's where the good parts of this item stop, as the curse might determine whether or not it's actually an item worth using, as rolling a 1 on any d20 roll you make causes a misfortune to happen, determined by the Shard Misfortunes table by rolling a d6. Rolling a 1 on the d6 makes you poisoned until the next dawn, which makes you roll all your attack rolls and ability checks with disadvantage. Rolling a 2 stuns you until the end of your next turn. A 3 forces you and creatures within 10 feet of you to save from being knocked prone. A 4 shoots 3 magic missile darts at a random creature within 30 feet of yourself, targeting yourself if no valid targets exist. Meanwhile, rolling a 5 causes beasts that have an intelligence score of 3 or lower to become hostile to you until the next dawn. And rolling a 6 causes you to have disadvantage on all your ability checks until the next dawn. While getting knocked prone or having free magic missiles cast on an enemy creature might not sound so bad, being poisoned, stunned, or having all your ability checks be made with disadvantage can be devastating. And having beasts automatically going hostile towards you can be extremely inconvenient, since that means you could attract unwanted attention of rats, cats, lions, mammoths, and a ton of other beasts hell-bent on making your day worse. While the benefits of this item are very nice to have, a lot of the times you'll only really benefit from 1 or 2 of the effects. A spellcaster doesn't really utilize strength unless you're a cleric or a paladin, but at the same time, not many spells rely on spell attack rolls either. So you really have to weigh what you're getting out of the shard in comparison to the misfortune you might suffer. Fortunately, with a simple remove curse, you can get rid of the misfortune altogether and just have the mega strength and spell attack bonus buff all to yourself, which is why the shard takes number 8 on this list. And stabbing the number 7 spot on this back would be the Spear of Backbiting and the Javelin of Backbiting, both from Tales of the Yawning Portal. Both of these items function the exact same way, except one is a spear and the other is a javelin, so they take on their respective stats for the most part. Both weapons are very rare and grant a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with them. Additionally, when thrown, their normal and long range both increase by 30 feet and deal 1 extra die of damage on hit. Afterwards, whether or not they hit or miss, the weapon flies back to your hand immediately. These weapons are really nice to have as throwing weapons, since they allow a barbarian to make ranged attacks more reliably than if they were using a crossbow or shortbow. While the range wouldn't be as much either, a barbarian could use their strength modifier for a more accurate ranged attack rather than dexterity, which would most likely be lower for a few points. However, the main drawback of these two weapons is the curse it brings. Along with being unwilling to part with the weapon, you have disadvantage on attack rolls made with weapons other than whichever one of the weapons you're attuned to. Additionally, whenever you roll a 1 on an attack roll using these weapons, they bend or fly towards your back. When this happens, you make a new attack roll against your own AC, taking damage as if you had hit yourself with your own weapon. This turns critical failures from automatic misses to potentially lethal attack against yourself, dealing unwanted damage and possibly knocking yourself out if your hit points happen to be low enough. And unlike previous entries on this list, you can't simply cast Remove Curse to only grant you the benefits of the Javelin, since the Backbiting curse that happens when you roll a 1 is an effect that's attached to the weapon itself, not a curse that's being extended to you. So even if you do remove the curse from yourself, it only allows you to willingly unattune from the item or switch to a different weapon, since you no longer have disadvantage on attack rolls made with other weapons other than the Backbiting one. However, unless you desperately need the extra damage or distance from throwing it, there's not really any reason to keep the Spear or Javelin of Backbiting attuned to yourself in that case. That being said, even with the curse in full effect, a fighter or barbarian with a reliable way to gain advantage, such as through a Samurai Fighter's Fighting Spirit subclass feature, granting them advantage on all weapon attack rolls they make that turn, or a Barbarian's Reckless Attack feature to grant themselves advantage on melee attacks that turn, won't really have to worry about rolling 1s often enough for the Backbiting effect to even be a problem. However, unless you're planning to use the Javelin or Spear or Backbiting to make range attacks all the time, you're much better off with a +3 weapon, since those are also considered very rare items as well. The only way that either of these weapons can make a higher spot on this list is by making it so the extra die to damage also apply to their melee attacks as well. However, because of their niche of only having a positive benefit to being thrown along with having the chance to backfire, The Spear of Backbiting and Javelin of Backbiting both take a lower spot on this list at number 7. Swearing Vengeance at number 6 on this list, we have the Sword of Vengeance from the DMG. This is an uncommon sword that acts as a +1 weapon, but requires attunement in order to gain the benefits. Unfortunately, once you're attuned to the sword, you're subjected to the sword's curse. Along with being unable to part with the sword, you also make attacks with disadvantage using any other weapon other than the sword. Additionally, while the sword is in your person, you must pass a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw every time you suffer any kind of damage in combat. If you fail, you're forced to attack the creature that damaged you until you or the creature you're attacking drops to 0 hit points, or until you're no longer within melee range of the creature you're attacking. Unlike with the backbiting weapons, however, removing the curse on the player only affects the unable to part with portion of the curse. Since you have disadvantage on all attack rolls made with weapons other than the Sword of Vengeance while attuned to it, the only way to switch weapons reliably is to remove the curse from the object first to instantly unattune to the sword, or remove the curse from the wielder so that they can willingly attune to the weapon itself. Also, removing the curse from the wielder does not get rid of the forced wisdom saves that they have to make whenever they take damage, so there's no real way to solely get the benefit of a +1 sword, with one exception. If you cast Banishment on the sword, it forces the vengeful spirit inhabiting the sword to leave it, causing the sword to become a +1 weapon with no other properties. This presumably also means it removes the need to attune to it like another +1 weapon, which can be a great way to introduce +1 weapons to the party in a unique and special way if you really wanted to. Unfortunately, unless you're able to find an NPC in-game that you can pay off or find a Scroll of Banishment, you won't be able to do this yourself until around 7th level, since Banishment is a 4th level spell. By then, your party should already be starting to find rare quality weapons and equipment, including +2 weapons. Regardless, the reason the Sword of Vengeance takes number 6 on this list is because, despite being a flat +1 weapon you can get around the time as other +1 weapons, the curse isn't really that debilitating. While you might struggle a little bit with the range attackers, there aren't many creatures that resist magical piercing or slashing damage, so it might be hard to bait the wielder to focus on something that resists the damage type of the weapon, except maybe something that has rage mechanics like a barbarian. Despite this, however, the benefit you'd be getting from the Sword of Vengeance is just so minuscule that it can't take a higher spot on this list, even though its curse isn't really that bad to deal with in the first place. And rolling around with the speed of sound towards number 5 spot is Murgaxor's Orb from Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos. This legendary orb is a sentient, chaotic, evil magical item, with an intelligence score of 20 and a wisdom and charisma stat of 16. It also sports an 18 AC and 20 hit points in case you want to shatter it, so long as you aren't using poison, necrotic, or psychic damage, as it has immunity to those types of damage, but only resistance to every other type of damage. It also has Hearing and Dark Vision to a range of 30 feet and can speak, read, and understand Common, as well as possesses the ability to telepathically communicate with any creature touching it. The orb also has a special ability to cast Suggestion spell anytime during your turn, targeting you and one other creature that touched the orb within the last 24 hours. Suggestion is a 2nd level concentration enchantment spell that basically nudges a creature to do something for the next 8 hours, so long as it isn't anything that actively puts the creature in harm's way, such as suggesting the creature go home and be a family man, for example. As for the curse that comes with this magical item, basically any humanoid you touch while holding the orb must succeed a DC 10 Wisdom save or become cursed as well. A creature that's cursed by the orb then bears an echo of Murgaxor's hateful thoughts and begins to suffer from light headaches that don't really affect the cursed creature in any way. However, whenever it's your turn, the orb can use an action to produce one of 2 effects, targeting one or more creatures it has cursed. The first effect causes the cursed creature to fall unconscious for 1 hour, or until woken up by taking damage, or someone else uses an action to shake or slap them awake. The other action allows the orb to cause the cursed creature to have horrific visions of terror, which forces them to view all non-cursed creatures as dangerous monsters for 10 minutes. When this happens, the cursed creature must use its action each round to make one attack against the nearest non-cursed creature, attacking them at random if more than one is within range. The only way to end this effect early is by inflicting the creature with an incapacitated condition. Once these effects end, the affected creature is no longer cursed. A cursed creature can also have their curse removed with the Remove Curse spell, or by destroying the orb, freeing everyone who's been affected by the curse that way. And if you want to keep track of who's been cursed by the orb, Detect Magic is a spell you can cast which will reveal an aura of enchantment surrounding a bearer of the curse. On the surface, This magic item doesn't seem to provide any significant benefits for the holder of the orb. However, unlike other magic items on this list, the orb doesn't actually put a curse on you. It might try and suggest that you do things against your character sometimes using a spell, but it can't really curse you. Instead, the orb is going to want you to curse other people so that it can knock them unconscious or spread the visions of terror. However, as great as these effects are, having to force a creature to fail a DC 10 wisdom save is an almost impossible task, especially at higher levels where wisdom tends to be a higher stat among high-level enemies. However, if you somehow manage to pull it off, the orb can just shut down that creature for the rest of the fight, or make the creature a temporary ally by forcing it to fight its friends. And if you somehow manage to befriend the orb by appealing to its chaotic evil nature, it might even let you curse your friends while only using its action on cursed creatures that aren't in your party, since it can target any number of cursed creatures with its abilities. This helps ensure a cursed creature affected by visions of terror only go after non-cursed creatures, which don't include your party members. However, because of how difficult this might be to pull off, and given how powerful the suggestion spell can be, there may be some ups and downs when traveling with Murgaxor's orb, especially if you can't sow the seeds of chaos because everyone keeps saving against being cursed. So the orb takes number 5 spot on this list as a result. And striking out at number 4 on this list, we have Devlin's Staff of Striking from Tomb of Annihilation. This is a very rare staff which grants a +3 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with it. It also comes with 10 charges that you can use to deal extra force damage whenever you hit a creature with a melee attack using the staff. Each charge grants an additional 1d6 force damage, and you can expend up to 3 at once. The staff regains charges at a rate of 1d6 plus 4 daily each dawn, but becomes a non-magical staff if you ever roll a 1 on a d20 roll after expending the final charge, so it's best to always leave at least 1 charge available. And while the item itself doesn't explicitly have the curse tag, it is still considered a cursed item, as per the description of what the item does whenever you attune to it. When you attune to the staff, you transform into a goat-humanoid hybrid over the course of 3 days, the only exception being tieflings who are completely immune to this curse. On the first day, you develop shaggy fur all over your body. The next day, your eyes change and become more goat-like while you start to sprout horns from your brow. On the final day, your fingers and toes meld into double digits while your horns grow to full length. Fortunately though, you'll still be able to wield weapons and cast spells normally, but the only way you can turn back to your former self is to remove Curse, Greater Restoration, or any other effect that ends a curse. And if you want to turn the staff into a regular Staff of Striking, you can use a Wish spell in order to get rid of the transforming effect of the staff altogether. While looking like a hideous goat hybrid might seem like a terrible punishment for characters that care about looks, it's overall pretty harmless. You can still use the staff normally, and you can cast any spells without any problems as well. The only thing Devlin's Staff of Striking even does is change your appearance, which is purely for aesthetics. And even then, you, or someone in your party, can simply cast Remove Curse when you attune to the staff to immediately end and reverse the transformation. For this reason, this magic item takes a higher spot on this list for having a curse that doesn't really affect the wearer mechanically, but only takes number 4 spot on this list as the next 3 entries all have much more powerful effects that are well worth any inherent downsides. Made from the bodies of many a scorpion, the number 3 spot on this list is the Scorpion Armor from the Tomb of Annihilation. This is a rare piece of heavy armor that provides 3 useful benefits while wearing it. You gain a +5 bonus to your initiative so long as you aren't incapacitated. You no longer have disadvantage on stealth checks as a result of wearing heavy armor. And the armor doesn't impose disadvantage on saving throws made to resist the effects of extreme heat. However, with effects like these, there's bound to be a stinger, right? Well, yes, but not in the way you might be thinking. The stinger is actually the curse this item has, where donning or doffing the armor imposes a DC 15 Constitution saving throw, or take 10d10 plus 45 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. Unfortunately, the only way to remove the armor's curse is via a Wish spell, so there's very little way to avoid taking the damage unless you inherently resist or are immune to poison damage altogether. While there aren't any inherent rules for sleep in armor that are baseline, there is optional rules in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which states that sleeping in light armor has no adverse effects on the wearer, but sleeping in medium or heavy armor makes it difficult to recover fully during a long rest. The rule then goes on to explain that you only regain 1/4 of your hit die, and you retain any levels of exhaustion you might have if you sleep in medium or heavy armor. So if you haven't spent any hit die or accumulated any levels of exhaustion, you're fine. But if you have and want to recover quickly, then you have to risk the 10d10 plus 45 poison damage each time you take the armor off, which could prove lethal. However, having a plus 5 bonus to your initiative is so powerful that it might even be worth taking this armor, especially if your DM doesn't impose any rules in regard to sleeping in heavy armor, since you would only have to worry about taking the poison damage once, presumably. As a paladin, it can be hard to go roll high enough in initiative to even have a chance at going first. But with this armor, you effectively have the equivalent of a plus 5 dexterity bonus for the purposes of initiative. And if you combine that with the alert feat for an additional plus 5 bonus, then you have a very high chance of not only going first in combat, but also committing a copious amount of radiant damage by smiting the biggest guy in the room with a huge smite right at the start of combat before they even get their first turn in. And if you manage to find a way to bypass the poison damage from putting on the armor, such as by playing a race that has a resistance to or immunity to poison damage, such as the T or Grung respectively, the Scorpion armor is among the best curse items you can rock, as not very many magic items affect initiative outside of a very few rare exceptions. And pulling itself towards the number 2 spot on this list is the Shield of Missile Attraction from the DMG. This is a rare shield with the very basic effect of granting you resistance to damage from ranged weapon attacks. Unlike other curse magic items, however, this one kind of synergizes with itself in a unique way. Attuning to the shield curses you with the unfortunate side effect of forcing all ranged weapon attacks made against the target within 10 feet of you to target you instead. Of course, you could remove the curse from yourself with a remove curse spell, but in this case, you might not want to. Not only would you be drawing arrows or crossbolts away from your nearby squishies, you'd also be taking much less damage than they would have, unironically making this shield a very good tanking item for a paladin or a fighter. Even if you're a cleric, as long as you're not sticking close by your friends, any ranged weapon attacks that hit you just aren't as effective now, which can help with your survivability greatly. That being said, of course, the biggest downside depends on who you give this item to in the first place. A Hexblade Warlock with a Shield of Missile Attraction might not want to be the target of every ranged weapon attack due to their inherently low amount of hit points, for example. But a Paladin might gladly use the shield as they not only have more hit points, they also have access to a larger amount of self-healing via their Lay on Hands feature. All in all, though, the Shield of Missile Attraction takes number 2 on this list for pretty much having no downsides and instead synergizes with its curse rather than actively harming the player. The only thing to worry about the shield is thinking about who would best benefit from being the party's pincushion. And cutting down the competition at the top spot on this list at number 1, we have the Axe of Dwarvish Lords from the DMG. This artifact weapon counts as a plus 3 weapon and inherently comes with the benefits of the Belt of Dwarvenkind, a Dwarven Thrower, and a Sword of Sharpness. The Belt of Dwarvenkind grants you plus 2 bonus to your Constitution score to a max of 20, advantage on persuasion checks made to interact with dwarves, and grants you the most overpowered effect in the game of having a 50% chance each day at dawn of growing a full beard, so long as you're capable of growing one, or a visibly thicker beard if you already have one. Additionally, if you aren't a dwarf, you also gain advantage on saving throws against poisons while also gaining resistance against poison damage, 60 feet of dark vision, and the ability to speak, read, and write Dwarvish. The Dwarven Thrower, meanwhile, comes with the benefit of being a plus 3 weapon, though this doesn't stack with the original plus 3 bonus granted by the Axe of Dwarvish Lords, and it has the thrown property with a normal range of 20 feet and a long range of 60 feet, something unique to this warhammer compared to the others. If you hit with a range attack using this weapon, it deals an extra 1d8 or 2d8 on giants. After making the attack, the weapon flies back to your hand. As for the Sword of Sharpness, this weapon deals maximum damage against objects you hit. Additionally, if you roll a nat 20 when attacking a creature, the creature takes an extra 14 slashing damage. After that, you roll a straight d20 again, lopping off one of the creature's limbs or a portion of its body if it doesn't have any, if you roll another nat 20. You can also speak the sword's command word to cause the blade to shed bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light for an additional 10 feet, lighting up dark areas for you and your party to see much more easily in. And if all of this wasn't enough, there are still plenty of effects the Axe of Dwarvish Lords has that we've yet to discuss. If you're a dwarf that's attuned to this axe, you gain immunity to poison damage, an additional 60 feet of dark vision, and proficiency with the artist's tools related to blacksmithing, brewing, and stonemasonry. As for the effects that don't cater to dwarves, you can cast Conjure Elemental to summon an Earth Elemental once per dawn. You can also cast the Teleport spell from the axe by using your action to touch the axe to a fixed piece of dwarven stonework. If your intended destination happens to be underground, then there is no chance of a teleport mishap. That can normally happen when casting the spell, and you arrive exactly where you want to. You can only do this once every 3 days, so no spam teleportation, sadly. As with pretty much every artifact, this axe also comes with a number of random properties. In this instance, it comes with 2 minor and 1 major beneficial property, and 2 minor detrimental properties. These properties are just random effects that add a bit of variety to artifacts, and can make or break some items depending on what's been rolled. For example, some minor beneficial properties might include an extra skill proficiency, bonus to AC, or even the ability to cast some lower level spells. Meanwhile, a major beneficial property might include passive hit point regeneration, a flat +2 to any one ability score, or straight up more damage per hit. On the flip side of things, however, some minor detrimental properties might include effects like smelling funky, losing or gaining weight, or having disadvantage on all saving throws against spells. While you might not be a big fan of smelling bad or being able to smell at all, it might still be worth taking this axe. But if you're rolling every saving throw against spells with disadvantage, then one might reconsider taking the axe. All that aside, however, with such amazing effects rolled into a single item, you might be thinking that the curse this weapon has would be one that is roughly equal in measure, right? Well, if you're not a dwarf and you become attuned to the weapon, you suffer a similar fate as one with the Devlin Staff of Striking. Your body slowly starts to transform. Over the course of 7 days, your appearance basically becomes that of a dwarf. However, these changes are only physical in nature, and doesn't affect any of your racial features, nor do you gain any by taking this appearance. You can also just restore your appearance with Greater Restoration or remove Curse. In summary, if you're a dwarf, you suffer no penalties while also gaining even more benefits, such as immunity to poison and such. But if you're not a dwarf, you also technically don't suffer any penalties. Unless your character has a problem becoming a dwarf, there really isn't any downside to worry about. With such an easily curable curse, it's almost strange how good this cursed item even is to begin with. Being a +3 weapon that has its own effects, along with the effects of 3 other magical items combined, you would think the curse would be something extremely heavy. Since that's not the case, the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords is hands down the best curse magic item on this list.